So we were just discussing a couple of different bills that have been introduced. Now, Senator Kavanaugh introduced a bill that would keep people off the medians. He says this is about safety. People say, well, this is an anti-homeless bill. He says they're just going to go to the sidewalks. I'm just keeping people out of the median. But Kavanaugh has kind of a history of proposing legislation and voting for legislation that is not the friendliest to our unhoused community. Now we have Representative Joseph Chaplick, who has introduced a bill in the House that is somewhat similar to ban pedestrians from congregating or soliciting in high-risk areas like raised medians, highway off-ramps, or any location that lacks a sidewalk. He says we're allowing them to be in spots where pedestrians shouldn't be. You can't stand in these areas where vehicles are traveling 30, 40, 50 miles an hour, or if you're a legislator, probably 30, 40, 50 miles over the speed limit, which they can do because of legislative immunity. Joining us in the studio right now is Stacy Champion. She's a local activist and advocate who was actually quoted in the ABC 15 story with our TV partners here at ABC 15. You're skeptical in the same way that we are.
I am. And so, like, my biggest issue with this, like, hey, don't get me wrong. I am not a fan of someone jumping off a median with a spray bottle of water trying to wash my windshield, right?
Gosh.
Like, not a fan of that. But what I take offense to with this is them bringing up how deadly our roads are to both pedestrians and drivers, but then calling it a pedestrian safety bill. Because if this were really, truly about pedestrian safety, there are 20 other examples of more proactive measures they could be taking. We are seeing the cities and others already criminalizing homelessness. And if you're out on the streets actually talking to folks like I am on a regular basis, a lot of these people who are panhandling are veterans. They are seniors. They are people who haven't had their disability applications be accepted.
Sure.
And why aren't those legislators doing more for the people so they don't have to panhandle in the first place, I guess I would say.
Stacy Champion joins us. She's a local activist and advocate. And you mentioned that there's a number of other ways that the legislature, if they were serious about doing something about safety, that they could dive into it more deeply. But I saw a story that said specialized crosswalk signals each cost about $250,000. So why isn't keeping pedestrians out of the medians and freeway off-ramps a good idea? Because theoretically, it wouldn't cost any money, would it?
I mean, I think you're basically setting people up to be criminalized, though. You're taking those who are the most vulnerable, who lack resources.
So if we put them on the sidewalk, that's a bad idea? If we say, hey, no more median, just sidewalk. You think they're going to do something a year from now that says, now you can't be on the sidewalk too?
Oh, for sure, because they already move people along. If you want to go for a walk with me, any day, I will show you that in action because
Pablo's
it happens.
Laughing because he knows I love to go for long walks.
I mean, yeah, let's go for a walk. Like, you'll see them moving people along, trying to get a little bit of shade in the summertime, all these different things. We already have unsheltered people getting moved out of our public parks. As an example, I just did an event a couple of weeks ago, a silly kind of light rail event, and was moved out of...
Was this the no pants light rail? This
was the way more pants.
Oh, that's right. We went the other way this year, right?
Yes, that's right. Which isn't popular, by the way.
No, that's a tragedy.
No pants is
way
more popular than
for sure.
Way more pants.
Yeah.
But so I looked a little ridiculous that day.
Yeah.
We were waiting for others to get off the light rail at the Roosevelt and Central Station. There's a big shade structure there.
Yeah.
And we were told that we had to be outside of the red line or we would be loitering while we were standing underneath the shade structure. So there's already a push to move people who don't look a certain way, maybe, out of public spaces, which I think is BS.
Yeah. So Stacy Champion, by the way, a local activist and an advocate and also a PR specialist in town here. You mentioned some of the other things that could be done. Did you have brief thoughts on that? And because in my mind, I'm thinking, is this legislation the easiest way, the fewest effective? In other words, it's a lot easier and I don't mean to cut you off here, I'm going to give you a moment.
No worries.
Is it a lot easier to say, let's just get some people off the side or off the medians, let's get them off the highway off-ramps, than it is to say, let's change the speed limit at all of these different intersections? That would be a lot more difficult, and it would affect a lot more people, and a lot of people would be more upset, whereas I don't think they really care what the non-voting unhoused think.
I don't even think it's about speed limits as much as it is the fact that our roads are designed for speed. We have big, wide roads with lots of lanes of fast-moving traffic. Yeah. And so, the data has proven that if you're just changing speed limit without implementing some design changes, people aren't going to slow down anyway. And so, there are things like I have been tracking the pedestrian and cyclist deaths in Maricopa County as an example. Mm-hmm. There are a large number of people who are actually being hit in crosswalks. Why is that? Well, how many times? I mean, we could go out right now to any intersection, watch people roll crosswalks, right? Yep. Watch people run red lights all the time. And we don't have well-painted crosswalks anywhere here, in my opinion, or very few places. 2, we're not backing people up. And as we get bigger vehicles, right, we have way bigger vehicles than we used to. As an example, there was, a 21-year-old woman who was killed in a crosswalk by a garbage truck, because they were right up to that line and couldn't see her. Yeah. A 66-year-old man in an electric wheelchair in a crosswalk, an 82-year-old woman in a crosswalk, a 25-year-old man in a crosswalk, a 13-year-old boy on his bike in a crosswalk. Yeah. There are a lot more meaningful things that could be done. We still have the suicide lanes on 7th Street and 7th Avenue.
Yeah, don't get me started on that.
Yeah, well, we can have another conversation about that because I actually have a petition to try to do away with them. But my point being that you have these legislators who are saying this is about pedestrian safety. Then these same legislators have, House Bill 2409, which is a call-it-in bill. And that would basically, it says, maybe issued a civil complaint for the violation rather than making the person guilty of a Class 3 misdemeanor for speeding.
Oh, yeah. Reducing the penalties on the speeding.
Exactly.
Right, yeah.
Along with your immunity.
And you know how I feel about the immunity.
And I'm in full agreement. Yeah. You have, House Bill 2235, which is the slowpoke bill. And I can tell you, not a lot of people are dying on our roads in Arizona because somebody's driving too slowly. You have a concurrent memorial asking Trump to do away with Vision Zero, which is all about pedestrian safety. You have the ridiculous bring your own booze to the golf course bill.
How many pages you got over there, Stacy?
It's been a busy session.
I came prepared, but I'm saying, I doubt these guys are Ubering or taking public transport to go play golf. Yeah. And we have a high number also of alcohol-related fatalities in car crashes in the state. Final
question here. All of those things that you mentioned, and we're finding agreement on a lot of those, although I think you should be able to take your own booze to the golf course. Can they all be done? In other words, can we say, let's get people out of the median because of what you laid out? A number of people are already dying in the crosswalks. We want to reduce the number of people and the opportunities for that, but also let's do some other traffic mitigation and some other things. I mean, can these things work in conjunction? Is it one or the other, or is it just that it's a disingenuous argument, in your opinion, that
I think it's a very disingenuous argument, and I don't think that we should be further criminalizing, people who are vulnerable. People who don't have the money, So, I mean, you have these legislators who don't want to pay a fine for speeding, but then they want to turn around and give somebody who's unsheltered a ticket for panhandling.
Well, somebody's got to make up for the ticket they didn't pay.
I guess so, right? But I just call it what it is. And my frustration was when 15 did the interview with that legislator. He's like, it doesn't say anything about unsheltered people. people. And it's like,
Well,
okay,
who else is it? Yeah.
exactly.
You're going to stop the firefighters from collecting their boots once a year? That's not what it's about.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
So I just don't like hypocrisy, and I don't like things that are kind of dishonest on their face is my issue with it.
Stacy Champion's a local activist and advocate and PR pro as well. Thank you so much for coming in, Stacy.
You are so welcome. Thank you for
Pleasure
having
having
me.
Thanks for watching The Chris and Joe Show. Click to see more from Chris and Joe and tap the button in the middle to subscribe to KTAR News.